What's up, Broncos country? Welcome back to the Broncos Podcast Network and YouTube for the latest episode of Broncos Now. As always, I'm your host, Sydney Jones. And coming up on today's episode, Broncos lead writer Eric Dalala joins the show. We'll discuss some of the moves the Broncos plan to make as the new league year begins next week. All that and more coming up. Joining me here in the Broncos Podcast studio for today's episode of Broncos Now is Broncos lead writer Eric Dalala. Eric, thanks for joining the show. Welcome back to the podcast studio.
Thanks, Sid. Happy to be back.
Happy to be back, too. How are things?
They're good, Sid. It's a little bit of a tough week around here.
Yeah.
Some big moves being made, but I think as Sean Payton and George Payton have said, they're focused on improving in 2024, on getting this franchise back to where it needs to be. And sometimes, Sid, that requires making tough decisions.
Yeah, like you said, Eric, some big news coming out of the team headquarters today. Thursday morning, the team announced that they are planning to release safety Justin Simmons. 8 years here with the organization, back when he was drafted in 2016, obviously made an immense impact on and off the field. We're going to miss him. End of an era.
Yeah, that's my guy.
Yeah,
we came in within a week of each other, same draft class.
Yeah.
Jokingly had said that to him many times. Just an all-around good guy. First of all, made a huge impact in the community as a Walter Payton Man of the Year, three-time nominee. Won the Darren Williams Good Guy Award for his cooperation with the media again and again. Was just always kind of that guy who, after a tough loss, would stand up and talk for this team. He would keep people positive. He was just kind of that positive force within the locker room for years and years and years. And on the field, great player, 4-time All-Pro selection, 2-time Pro Bowler, had a bunch of interceptions, tied for the league lead in interceptions a couple of seasons ago. Just a heck of a football player. Unfortunately, Sid, while he had the chance to learn from some great players early in his career, he never enjoyed that team success, and it certainly wasn't his fault. I mean, this defense has been really good for a long time now, many of those seasons among the top in the league, but the team just didn't have that success. He, of course, did not make the playoffs with the organization, which is tough to see. And so sending Justin Simmons out the right way, the team thanked his family, thanked him for all his time in the community and for his on-field accomplishments. That he'll always be a Bronco. But unfortunately, you talk about some of the moves that are required when this is a business, the salary cap situation. This felt like one of those decisions. And so Justin Simmons will be moving on.
Yeah. Eric, it seems like a lot of the fans are wondering, if you're going to make this move, why not go ahead and trade him? So what do you think really just went into this decision?
Yeah, it's a fair question. I think, certainly at some point you hope to hear from George Payton, Sean Payton about the specifics of the move. I don't know if that'll be when free agency begins, if it'll be later on down when we're at the annual league meetings, Sid, at the end of March. But at some point, I'm sure that question will be asked. And I think surface level and what you've seen from some reporters out there is just there's been so many safeties that have been released and so many top safeties still at a high level in their game. It feels like maybe there's a little bit of an adjustment to that market. And so when there's so many options out there and so much demand, I would imagine that it's hard to get a trade done. And again, that's just speculation at this point. But for fans asking, that seems like an explanation that makes sense. Just that there's a lot of safeties out there. It makes it harder to get a trade done.
Yeah, like you said, Eric, a lot of safeties have hit the market recently. A lot of DBs in the free agent market right now in general. What do you think moving forward about this safety room that we have here with PJ Locke and Caden Stearns? Do you think they'll look to add to that, or?
Yeah, well, obviously, if you want PJ Locke to come back, you got to re-sign him. Yeah. So that could be a priority potentially in free agency. We'll have to see how they approach that. Caden Stearns still under contract. He's got to show that he can be healthy, and I'm sure that'll be probably a primary goal for him this year, because when he's out on the field, tremendous player, but got to remain available. And then, you'll see if you can get PJ Locke back, is he a guy that you feel comfortable starting there? Because of how many guys are out on the open market, do you target a guy initially? Do you wait for things to settle down and then, find maybe that second tier or second wave, third wave option there at safety and bring in a veteran? That could be a choice. Yeah. Obviously, the Broncos have some young guys with Delarian Turner-Yell, J.L. Skinner. Is it a chance for one of those guys to take a step forward? We didn't see Skinner get much action at all last year, but I know the Broncos were high on him. I thought he was a higher round talent than where he was drafted and just fell due to injury. So that'll be one of the spots where it'll be interesting to see how the Broncos approach things. And it's really a spot where you might have to figure out two solutions, right? And for so long, it's just been, hey, Justin Simmons is going to be that guy, and then who's next to him? And Kareem Jackson had been brought back a couple times on 1-year deals. But this could be a situation where maybe you decide you need 2 new safeties. Maybe you don't. Maybe you bring PJ Locke back. You don't need any new safeties, but that'll be an interesting position to watch, to be sure.
Definitely. Well, Eric, in other news, the Broncos also announced earlier this week that they're planning to release quarterback Russell Wilson. First, before we get into that, I want to read the statement that general manager George Paton and head coach Sean Payton put out. They said, "We spoke with Russell Wilson today," this was on Monday, "to inform him of the release after the start of the league year. On behalf of the Broncos, we thank Russell for his contributions and dedication to our team and community while wishing him the best as he continues his career. As we move forward, we are focused on building the strongest team possible for the 2024 season and beyond. We are excited to improve this offseason and will have the flexibility to get better through the draft and free agency." Eric, as the team moves forward here, what do you think their plans are for the quarterback position then?
Yes, it'll be interesting, obviously, moving forward without Russell Wilson. Jared Stidham, Ben DiNucci, both under contract. We saw Jared Stidham start those final 2 games of the year last year, did some good things. He said at the end of the year that he's hopeful he has a chance to prove he can be the starter. So I think it starts there with that group of who's in the building currently. Obviously, free agency comes next. We'll see. Do the Broncos decide they want to add a veteran player? There's a lot of noise right now about some potential big-name quarterbacks that could be released. We'll have to see if the Broncos choose to go that direction. There's been some speculation externally, maybe not enough salary cap space to make that sort of thing happen.
Right.
But certainly a lot of guys that you could look at that could add to the quarterback room potentially. And then you get to the draft, right? And that's maybe, I think, where people are most excited externally, if you're a fan, media about the possibilities, just because there's a lot of quarterbacks in this class that could potentially go in the first round. We still have, a month and a half to go, and so there's all this chatter about who's going to trade up, who's going to trade back. Will this guy be there at 12? Do you need to go up to get him? All those sorts of things. It's what makes this time of year fun. And I certainly think following this news that the Broncos have decided to part ways with Russell Wilson, that you can put the Broncos firmly in that mix of at least a team to talk about as somebody that could take a quarterback. And Sid, we had the chance to talk to him last week at the Combine, and it was just interesting to start to get to know these guys and hear a little bit from them.
Yeah, Eric, you mentioned you talked to some of the rookie quarterbacks at the Combine. What did some of them have to say about their meetings with the Broncos last week?
Yeah, I think it's just interesting to hear, what specifics do some guys give you. And certainly people pointed out, hey, Davis Webb was involved.
Yeah.
Joe Lombardi was involved. Actually kind of sounded like Sean Payton let Davis Webb, the quarterback's coach, lead a lot of these meetings, which is interesting. Michael Penix from Washington said the Broncos pulled up some of his bad plays and had him watch those and talk through those things.
Oh,
maybe
wow.
a little bit of a test there.
Yeah.
And I think the overall consensus from all these guys, and of course they're going to say this, but the meetings went well, and J.J. McCarthy from Michigan said it would be an honor to play for a guy like Sean Payton. I think we heard that consistently from a variety of different players, whether it was Jane Daniels from LSU, Michael Pratt from Tulane. I mean, a lot of different guys who have said, hey, playing for a guy like Sean Payton would be tremendous. And we'll just have to see what happens. But it just gives you kind of that first taste of, okay, everything matters, right? And the film and throwing on the field and the athleticism and the height and the size and all that. And I think part of that, too, is how do you carry yourself? And teams get a chance to see that in these meetings. And we learned that they had meetings with about all these guys.
Yeah.
But for media, for us, the chance to see these guys is at that podium. And so just to get a little bit of insight into whether it's their competitiveness or how they handle themselves with the press, it's not everything, but it gives you maybe another puzzle piece.
Yeah, definitely. Was there anyone that kind of stood out to you specifically?
Well, I mean, I would say the guys that are gaining a lot of traction, it seems like nationally being tied to the Broncos are J.J. McCarthy and Bo Nix. And, who knows how much of that is a smokescreen? Is it other teams saying, hey, we want the Broncos to be connected to these guys so we can go get our guy? Do we want the Broncos to have to trade up to get one of these guys? Are the Broncos putting that out there so that their real desire is not found out? Do they actually like these guys? I mean, that's the fun part of this time of year, too, is you don't know what the heck is true and what's a huge lie. And so that is kind of the chatter right now that Bo Nix and J.J. McCarthy are kind of the guys that could be available, could be good value in that range. think during the combine we heard a lot of chatter said that J.J. McCarthy could be gone much earlier,
Right.
that Jaden Daniels could fall a little bit, that Drake May could fall a little bit. We saw some talk before the combine that the Broncos could trade all the way up to 2 to get a guy like Drake May.
Right.
So probably the one guy that I didn't hear anything about or that you didn't see a lot of connections to is Caleb Williams. I think there's a consensus right now that he's probably going to go to Chicago.
For sure.
But the rest of the guys, I mean, it's just a matter of who do you like, and more importantly, who do Sean Payton and George Payton like? And
Absolutely.
I don't think they're going to let anybody know that until draft night.
As they shouldn't. Well, Eric, it was a busy week here. Should be another one next week with the start of free agency, too. So a lot of things coming up the next couple weeks.
Yeah, it'll be interesting, Sid, to see how the Broncos approach this. Obviously, legal tampering begins next Monday. Yep. Free agency starts at 2 p.m. Mountain Time on Wednesday. That's when you can officially sign guys. And we'll have to see what the Broncos do. George Payton said they won't be as active as they were last year, but do they still go get one big name guy, or do they truly stay quiet the whole week and then wait till things quiet down a little bit? It'll just be interesting, and I think you'll get a sense over the coming days if the Broncos do end up making more roster moves, or if they don't and they keep some guys and then sign players next week. It'll be an indication of maybe where this team is heading into the draft
for sure.
Both in terms of how they're going to be able to compete in 2024, and as George and Sean both said, the and beyond is key, right? That this team has got to find a way to be more consistently successful, and this is an exciting time, an important time of year to get that done.
Certainly is. Well, Eric, appreciate you joining the show today and for your insight always.
You got it, Sid.
Well, that's going to do it for today's episode of Broncos Now. Broncos Country, thanks so much for tuning in. We'll meet you right back here on the Broncos Podcast Network and YouTube next week for a new episode. I will see you all then.